Freedom Fighter 1776, the podcast. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mark Charles Bashaw. We got an awesome show today. We're talking about the military weaponized mandates against service members and how it's really purged the best and brightest from our force, the ones who were submitting that protected communication to their chain of command to warn them that they were violating federal laws, that they were violating their oath to the Constitution, that they were violating military regulations and experimenting on service members with these weaponized COVID-19 products, the jabs, the masks, and the tests. But today we've got an intelligence officer on the show from the Navy, Jessica Sheffield, U.S. Navy officer, educator, and creative visionary who has served on 3 continents and visited over 20 countries in both military and public service. A graduate of the University of Florida, she began her journey as a NASA educator before commissioning as a Naval Intelligence Officer in 2010. Her assignments include Joint Intelligence Operations Center Europe in the United Kingdom, Carrier Strike Group 8, and the United Nations Command in Korea. Jessica earned multiple Joint Commendation Medals, led intellectual and morale-boosting initiatives, and consistently challenged corruption from within the system, even when it came at a great personal risk. After refusing the unlawful COVID-19 mandates, she was unlawfully discharged from military service. Today, she continues her mission through Metanoia Creative, which is her website. You can see that down below. She writes, she produces, and consults and speaks on cultural, moral, and spiritual truths. She is actively working to correct her military records, and thanks to President Trump, she's actively and aggressively going after reinstatement opportunities to come back into military service. So we'll get her perspective and her experience with that. And her creative work, which includes novels, viral music videos, panel presentations, and weekly publications, is a powerful extension of her stand for truth, accountability, and resistance to tyranny. Welcome to the show, Jessica. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited to tell some sea stories.
Yeah, no. So first, I want to see if I can share a little bit more on your bio. Let me pull it up real quick. I think it's right here. There we go. So we've got your website here. We've got your bio, your background, and I encourage everybody go over here, check out our website. There you are there.
Yeah. That was fun times. That was on the Truman drawn Spy versus Spy, and a fellow junior officer at the time drew Secret Squirrel, or painted, and got that on the bulkhead there.
That's awesome. And you've got some family members who obviously military service is within your family. Or if you mind speaking about that, your father served in the Army. Is that correct?
So my dad was Navy. He was 31 years. He was a naval submariner for 31 years, and his dad was an Army officer, and his dad, so my grandpa, I always get this wrong. I feel bad. Yoshimi-san looked it up for me, and I always just shorten it to basically the military governor of Kyoto, but for the occupying 8th Army. So it's more like the commander of military occupation for the prefecture of Kyoto.
Oh, wow.
It was a pretty huge position. I didn't realize this until, I had kind of time to dig into this after I was kicked out. So, I like to say God puts us exactly where we're meant to be. And even though I'm really trying to get back in, trying to square that away, I'm enjoying and taking measures with the time I have, not obligated to be somewhere to go digging around. And Kyoto last year was amazing. We met the governor. We took a photo in the same place my grandpa was back in 1945 to 1950. All that crazy stuff. And of course, on my mom's side, I'm pretty sure her uncles served in Vietnam, a bunch of them. So yeah, even though I started off as a NASA educator, and I love teaching, I love nerding out, but there was just something, the whole time I was there where I was like, doesn't feel right. Got to get the civilian off of me.
Yeah, yeah. So you joined military service 2010. Did you go through ROTC program? So you went or direct commissioning?
I direct commissioned because I had completed University of Florida's. Originally, I started off going for a business degree, but there's a funny non-military related story about that. And long story short, I did a report that said Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were insolvent and going to crash any day. The professor was like, "That's crazy. Rewrite it or I'm failing you." And I'm like, "Then fail me, deuces." And I decided to switch up my major, and instead of getting a business degree, got a language degree
Yeah.
because I was already studying East Asian language and literature because I'd already taught myself Japanese at that point. And
Right.
right out of there, went to do the NASA thing, but then Navy after that.
Yeah. Wow. So tell us about your unlawful discharge. When were you kicked out, and why were you kicked out, and what's the status now?
So, I'd say the actual motion to begin the process of getting me out started at my last billet, which was I was N2 of ComSub Gru 9 at Bangor, Washington, and I had entered that command. They required masks, and I was like, all right, I don't agree with it. But I had actually just come back from Korea, where the air was so bad that before all this COVID stuff happened, I had actually researched and bought my own N99 carbon filter mask because the pollution was so bad. I'm sitting there going, if I don't do something, I'm going to be one of those people like, do you or a loved one suffer from mesothelioma? Did you serve at Camp Humphreys during these years? So I didn't mind the mask mandate so much as long as I could use my own, which wasn't, just recycling CO2 right back into my lungs.
Right.
And, then as soon as the order was released that if you were jabbed, you no longer had to wear it, but if you weren't jabbed, you had to. And I was like, that's discriminating based off of what should, a medical decision. Like that's not only a HIPAA violation, that's detrimental to good order and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it known that I completely disagreed with that. And they said, tough titties, figure it out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to follow this order, but I've already made known my, complete disagreement that this is basically, you're screwing yourself over. You are hurting your own command by doing this. And then I believe there was an update to guidance released that specifically stated that commanders and people under commanders were not allowed to ask the jab status of service members anymore. And I went, Bob's your uncle. There's the don't ask, don't tell. I'm not wearing this shit anymore because it's.
Yep.
I thought it was completely. It's not that it's ridiculous. It was illegal. Like it went against so many different things, And then I had the CMC in the middle of a HOD meeting, like in front of all the other HODs, go, you're not supposed, you're supposed to be wearing a mask, Commander. And I was like, and you're not supposed to inquire about people's jab status, CMC. And it was like this standoff kind of thing that happened. And you could feel everyone in the room was like, ooh, this is not good. And this is exactly what I was talking about. This is the detrimental to good order and discipline. This is making a visual distinction between people based off of their medical decisions, which is completely wrong. And it started with that. And I'd say that was maybe, I don't know, 6 months, I'm pulling from my memory here, maybe 6 months before the actual mandate came out.
Right.
And then, of course, when that happened, they were like, all right, Sheffield, you got to do it now. And I was like, negative. I submitted an official request to speak to the admiral about what was going down right before the actual mandate came out, because the medical officer emailed me privately, and tried to pull me into a one-on-one and convince me to get the jab. And I was like, is this legal? Like, you got me alone in a room and you're trying to tell me to get the jab. And I brought up all these questions because remember, I worked at NASA before this. I'm a giant freaking autist nerd. Like, I am, I'm a chanter before chanting was a thing, right? And I've been studying mRNA for years, ever since it was like, first came out however many years before this and had disastrous results in the laboratory. And
Uh-huh.
so when I even heard that they were going to make this an mRNA thing, I was like, oh, rad. Did they perfect the lipid nanoparticle distribution problem yet? And everyone who was all gung ho was like, what lipid nanoparticle
Yeah.
delivery system? And I was like, they never fixed that? Holy shit, this is still an experiment? Oh my God. And so I'm asking basic questions to the medical officer like okay, what about this? What about that? What about the fact that this stuff accumulates in the ovaries? And I've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, which already jacks up my female plumbing, and it's a big freaking deal.
Right.
So again,
Right.
I'm seeing from the perspective of it's not really about the jab. It's about everyone's behavior surrounding the jab. And then what was really creepy was about a week after our conversation when I asked the doc a lot of uncomfortable questions that he either couldn't answer, said was fake news, or just stayed silent on. Suddenly he retired. Just kind of wasn't talking about it before. And
Yeah, that's what we saw across the board is this mouth breathing, glazed eyes look back at us when we brought up legitimate concerns like you did about these things. And that was their response. And then they projected their good order and discipline disruptions upon us when really it was them that completely gutted and tore apart good order and discipline, trust, morale, laws, military regulations, their own oaths to the Constitution. Now, I was at Army Public Health Center. I was very well aware of the psychological operations with the risk communication strategies that they were pushing upon service members. You're trained. Were you trained in psychological warfare operations or information dominant warfare?
so I got my info dominance warfare pin, which I like to give myself shit for that because what a silly title, right? But yes, I dominated the information, and part of it is you learn a bit about psyops, psychological warfare, and just how people think and how we do operations to get other people to think in certain ways. But on top of that, again, I'm a tist, man. Like when it comes to how people operate, my whole thing just on the side that I had been doing for years for fun, cinema aficionado, where we talked about meaning and storytelling, and I would always highlight, guys, you've got to be careful what you're consuming because it changes how you think. Like you don't think you are not immune to propaganda, that Garfield meme.
Right.
Um, and so, I was just observing the what was being put out and then the behaviors of everyone around me and then my own behaviors, like watching my own thoughts, like, wow, I'm now thinking this when I should not be thinking this in this situation. And the real kicker for me was the fact that I'm doing all this and I never got hyper public or vocal about it because my belief was that's being disruptive. That's demanding attention and using the situation and all that. But I had sailors, quietly talking about this. They were too scared to, put it
Mhm.
down on paper or go on the record. But they were like, I'm scared. I don't want to lose my job. Like I really don't want to take this shot, but I can't lose my job. I got a family. I got this. I got that. And then, senior officers, I retire in like 2 years a year. I can't not do it. And so when I did take my concerns to Admiral Goucher and, I wrote him not a bitchy email, but a very deliberate, like precisely worded email and said something like, Admiral, I'd really like to talk about this as you're in too, as the person who
Mhm.
is concerned with all of the people that have clearances at the command that I'm technically in charge of and making sure that they stay up to date and everyone stays trained up and all that.
Right.
And he revealed to me when we were he finally granted me a meeting, that the only reason that he was even talking to me is because I used the words hostile work environment in my email. And I'm like, wait, that's the only thing, and not the detrimental to good order and discipline, and all the crazy,
Right.
stuff that I had been mentioning. And long story short, I basically told him, sir, we've got a problem because a lot of your sailors are lying for money. They're saying that they're scared of losing their jobs, and they don't want to take the shot, but that's why they're going to take it, because they're afraid of getting kicked out. And his response to that, instead of, oh my God, that's a violation of their oath. I don't want, a whole dang 200 plus people of liars under me.
Right.
Instead of that, he said, good, they should be afraid of losing their jobs. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. And then, of course, he continued from there. I was like, and this is all bullshit, and you're spreading disinformation, and da da da. I was like, oh, okay. This is where we are right now. Like, this is what's actually going on. And Admiral Goucher's still in. He got 2 more stars after that fiasco.
Of course he did. Of course he did. Coward, tyrant.
Total communist. He complete violation of his oath. He needs to be court-martialed.
Absolutely. I would argue that, I would argue that all of the commanding generals at that time period need to be investigated. And I'm pretty sure there's documentation from someone in their chain of command that showed them the violations of military regulations, the violations of law, the violations of their oath of office, and specific and substantial dangers to public health and safety, which was the VAERS data, which is the Department of Defense's own database to report.
And that's exactly what they used against me when I said, you're not supposed to be asking about any of my medical statuses. This is a HIPAA violation. Like, not only is it a HIPAA violation, like you're literally putting your nose where it doesn't belong, just morally. And their response was always, it's for public health and safety, while the VAERS data was showing that everyone who was getting the jab was having severe health problems, not just with the myocarditis. I'm looking at it from the female perspective, and I'm going, look, I've had plumbing issues for ages. They actually did a study on me years earlier in the service and interviewed me about having polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I knew as a woman, if there is any change to your cycle, that is a full stop medical emergency. That is either, if you're not pregnant, that is a massive medical issue. And they were trying to act like it was no big deal when female service members were coming forward saying, hey, I've had a change in my period after getting the first or second or whatever number jab. And again, if you don't know, you'd go like, oh, okay, no big deal. Especially, if you're a dude, you don't care about chicks plumbing. It's like, who cares unless your wife has infertility issues at home and you know about that stuff, which I don't think there are that many.
Right.
But that was all over the place.
All over the place, all in the databases. We saw it in the Defense Medical Epidemiological Database. And then, even prior to that, just the VAERS data alone, from my standpoint as a public health officer at the Army Public Health Center, looking at their risk communication strategies and being like, guys, where's the VAERS data? Why didn't you put the VAERS data in there? And then after I submitted the DMED data to a federal court in one of the court cases, they literally called me an insider threat, took my government laptop from me. And again, DMED data is not PII. It's redacted. All those privacy things are redacted. It's just numbers. And from my standpoint as a public health officer, I would use that to create risk communication strategies for specific geographical locations. My specialty was medical entomology, so I was looking at the medical entomology, vector diseases. But I also started looking at this too because in what was it? The FDA came out with they accidentally released a slide of all the dangers on October 22nd, 2020 or 20. Yeah, I think it was 2020 of the injuries that were possible with these injections And then so I pulled all those ICD codes, and sure enough, like they're showing huge signals, but again, nothing in the risk communication strategies. And they were actively running psychological operations with their message perception messaging program, right? Which
Yes.
goes back to what you said with, you got to be careful what you're watching. It's all targeting your attitudes, your perceptions, your beliefs, and your concerns to manipulate you to make a decision and to agree to something that's completely dangerous and deadly for public health and safety reasons, which is a complete lie. Now,
I want to mention something about that, by the way, exactly what you're talking about. It is to shape perceptions. And a lot of people might be hearing this, and I like to talk to everyone. I've got some interviews with people who do not align with me politically, like Mr. Richard Epcar and stuff like that. But I like to point out that, look, back when this was first breaking, like 2019, 2020, I was fully entertaining like the idea that this was real, like there was an actual pandemic and there was a real danger and all that stuff. And I'm one of those people where I'm like, look, I don't doom and gloom either way. Whatever's happening, I'm just like, wow, fascinating. Writing it down, reporting it to the boss. That's my job as an intel officer. I don't take sides. And I was, looking at what was being released and siding with it, like, hey, this might be the next Spanish flu. We could be living through a historical time. How fascinating is this? And I was, happily siding with that. And hell, when the mask mandate came out, everyone months before, again, I was in Korea during this time when the mask mandate first came out. Everyone had been making fun of me previously for wearing my N99 carbon filter mask because of the frickin' pollution in the air. They're like, how's it going, Darth? I was like, yeah, shut up. And then the mask mandate gets released. And I was like, oh, I'm way ahead of you guys. And guess what? Mine's better because you're only required N95. I've got an N99 with a proper filtration system, so I'm not inhaling my own CO2. And it actually filters out down to it can filter down to the viral level. And then I started getting pushback, as the months continued and they started refining what they wanted people to think. Suddenly, my mask was becoming unacceptable. And I was like, what the hell are you guys talking about? They're like, well, it has vents on it. And I was like, you do realize that you breathe out. Like yours doesn't have vents, but you do realize that you're still breathing out and your mask isn't catching any of that, right? In fact, it's making a cloud around your whole damn head that disperses worse than the two vents that direct my breath down and basically right into my, collarbone area. So what the hell are you talking about? And thank God that was happening because it started making me think, because again, I'm not immune to propaganda. I probably would have gotten caught by this too. Luckily, all this shit happened leading up to it,
Yeah, so you're like, this isn't about a virus at all. This is completely about, compliance. From my standpoint, when I was in the Air Force, I did a lot of pesticide spraying. I was entomology, pest management, public health type, vector-borne suppression. And you're taking the mass that you're specifically talking about and you're matching it with the micron size of the chemical that you're dispersing, and you're making sure that it's able to filter that out. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm like, really, it was just completely
symbolic.
It was so bad.
It was put the communist sticker in your storefront, so you can actually do business, right?
Yeah, it was bad. When I was kind of doing open source. I guess you could call it like anon activity on the social realms, and so I was seeing a lot of open source intelligence about something was coming, something was going to happen. And then it like a black swan event, quote unquote. And I'm like kind of paying attention. And so when this popped off, the thing that struck me as odd was here I am at Army Public Health Center, and they're like, okay, everybody go home. Go telework. And I'm like, what? Shouldn't we be like, get get the war room ready? Like, we're going to figure this out. And then prophylaxis and all that was out the window. It was very clear to me.
It was all psyops designed to isolate so that you could then be receptive to the message.
Yep. So let's talk about, so you go through this whole shenanigans with the masking and all that. And then obviously you're not participating with the experimental injections, rightfully so. When did you get unlawfully discharged, and what does that look like now with Trump's executive order to bring service members back? Has Big Navy reached out? Have you gone through the process of correcting your military records? Also, and I'm sorry for all the questions, but what was the code on your DD-214?
So I'll answer that one right now. I don't remember the code, but I actually had a whole back and forth email when this was going on. Like, hey, why does my code say unacceptable conduct and not?
I got the same one.
Yeah, and not specifically COVID injection refusal, because they had a specific code for refusing the anthrax. So I was expecting a specific code for refusing COVID,
which was JNC parentheses anthrax.
Yeah. And so they put that on the DD-214, and I had a back and forth with my command saying what's going on, but I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. The kickoff started when the order came down, like, this is now mandated and you have to do it. And at the same time, I don't know if many people know this, but Big Navy was setting up a specific board to handle this COVID kick out stuff, to take the decision out of the hands of commanders. So they had plausible deniability where they were not the ones making the decision anymore. And so Admiral Goucher was like, take it, or we're going to follow what's set forth by Big Navy, which is, if you refuse, you're getting a page 13, which torpedoes your entire career forever. On top of that, you're getting a detrimental spot fit rep in addition to the page 13, which again double torpedoes your career if you ever get out of this. And so that all happened. That was a rough night when I was like, wow, am I really going to do this? Because it's hard to believe, for people like you and I now, but no one was on my side. I mean, I had friends and family saying I was making a mountain out of a molehill and making the dumbest decision of my life. And I was sitting with that. And it took about 6 hours for me to finally, stop crying, because again, I'm a female, and make the decision that I'm not going to do this. So I wrote my rebuttal, my reply to my own page 13, and submitted that for records. And after that happened, everything started kind of snowballing very oddly. I found out at that point they had already gotten a new N2 who was like a rank lower than me to come in and take my position. When they came in, I was training them to basically take my job, and it was very odd. Like he wasn't good at his job. Like he was a little too quick to do whatever he was told. Let's just put it that way. Rather than, no, you're the N2. You need to lend your discernment to your boss. Like, that is the number one thing you can do. But as that was happening, I was basically kind of railroaded and given a checklist, like, okay, do all this stuff because you are going to get kicked out. We just don't know when. So then Big Navy basically dangled that in front of me, not giving me a date, but saying, no, you're going to get kicked out. And I'm sitting here going, do I sell my house? Like, what do I don't know what to do. For 6 months, I was basically just yanked around by the nose. And finally, I can't remember it at the moment. I can send you this, the title later, but the Big Navy organization that was making these decisions then put out, okay, separate anyone who refuses. And I was a bit of a unique situation because I never signed a waiver. I never requested exemption because I ended up talking to the local chaps and saying, what would a religious exemption entail? And after he told me, what it would be, he also confided in me like the service is completely secular. They hate Christ. They hate Christianity. This is just how it is. And I was like, man, that's sad, chaps. Like, sorry to hear that. But every single waiver, whether it be religious or medical or anything, in the fine print, if you read the whole thing, you would have had to agree that it was a lawful order in the first place, which I never did. I always said this is an unlawful order and I'm refusing an unlawful order. Doesn't matter if you guys say or Big Navy says it's lawful. That's
Right.
what every despot in history has said. Like it's the law. Like you're not following
Right.
the law, right? And so when that started kicking off, I think within only 4 or 5 weeks, it went from, okay, here's your date to, you're out. And I had to do a Diddy move, and I'm alone. Like I'm just on my own doing all this stuff. I had to do a Diddy move that it was disastrous. How criminal
Yeah.
movers can be. It's nice when the Navy handles it, but if you got to do it yourself, God help you. Like
I
do
know.
do not trust those people. And yeah, it was just a total shit show. I was completely uprooted. I immediately started, putting out applications and all that for as many different jobs as I could. I think I must put out like 200 or 300 applications on like Indeed and,
Right.
LinkedIn and things like that. But yeah, it was creepy because the JAG was lying to me like throughout this entire thing. I found out she kept putting things in front of me saying, "Here, sign this. Just sign this." And I'd always read it. I'm like, "This says I'm resigning." She's like, "Oh no, it's a qualified resignation." And I'm like, "But I'm not resigning. I told you guys you have to kick me out. I am not resigning." And she said to my face, "No, it's not resigning." And then I said, "Okay, well, you won't mind if I change the wording." And she couldn't say no because then she would have to admit that she had been lying. So, I changed all the wording on almost every piece of paper before I signed it to always state I am being, involuntarily separated by the Navy due to jab refusal. And finally, when I got my DD 214, it said unacceptable conduct, and I refused to sign it until they put, jab refusal on it. And that took almost like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of back and forth with whoever the civilian lady was. Like, I don't think it was her fault because she was genuinely saying, there is no code for that. I don't know what to do here. And I said, put it in the notes. I'm not
Yeah.
signing anything until that wording is in there. And it's a real tiny little thing in there, but it's in there. So jumping forward now, because I've left out so much. You
Yeah.
understand how much I've left out.
Yep.
But yeah, like jumping forward to, before President Trump got in and said, hey, we're bringing you back, the BCN or the Navy dropped the mandate. And I was like, there's the admission. There's the admission. It was never about readiness and it was BS because
Drop the mandate.
if it was readiness, the mandate would never have been dropped. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm going to do my due diligence and apply to the BCNR to get reinstated, have my records corrected, all that. And, I didn't think that the BCNR themselves would be the ones to reinstate me, but I figured they're the first step because they'll say something like, we can't do this, here's who you contact, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Long story short on them, it took a year, and finally they came back, and I think my precise, request was, admit that it was unlawful. You guys have to admit that it was unlawful. Reinstate me, backdated to the day that you illegally kicked me out, and persecuted me for upholding my oath. And after that, remove the detrimental fit reps, page 13, all that from my record so I can get back to work and actually have a career. And after a year, they finally get back to me, and the beginning of the letter was very promising. It was like, we have decided to vote in your favor, blah, blah, blah. But then I read all the fine print, and it was, you were rightfully kicked out because you disobeyed a lawful order. we do see that your code was incorrect on your records, that you were you were separated. We're going to change that code to you voluntarily resigned, and then we're going to delete all of the fit reps that you requested us to delete about the COVID refusal. And I was like, I immediately responded back, thank you for putting in writing that you are admittedly deleting evidence and lying about what I had requested. And I just was very matter of fact about it, because I don't think it's malice. I think these people are that stupid, the ones left over, right?
Yep.
And I put it all down in writing and said, thank you for admitting that you're deleting evidence and lying about what I said, about what I submitted. And I got a really angry letter back. We are not deleting evidence because presumably you have the original copies. And I replied to that, said, thank you for admitting that you've deleted all evidence except copies that only I have retained personally.
Wow.
Because these people don't know. Again, I'm the autist here. I'm the nerd. Like, you don't try these tricks on the nerd. I'm the one who knows how to do this to other people and would use that as, like, that's why I'm the intelligence officer. Like, you want something done, you need to make something happen, like, ask me. I'm a targeteer also, like a qualified 3 Alpha 1. So it's like, what do you need removed? A person, a building, an organization? Like, let me know. I'll brainstorm it for you. But yeah, so the BCNR comes back and does that, and that's when I kept holding out hope that the right thing would happen, that the people who were kicking people out they just didn't know, and it could be rectified, who knows, in 5, 10, 20 years. I wasn't in any rush. But then when I saw the BCNR quite literally just committing felonies openly via email, I was like, holy shit, this is insanity. And they also, I found out, they lied to a sitting congressman, because I had been keeping Bill Posey up to date on all this stuff as I was doing it. Because I learned my lesson, like, make sure a third party is present, because the he said, she said doesn't fly. And Bill Posey's office sent me a letter that Big Navy had sent his office but didn't send me. And in that letter, they lied about my official request. They said she never asked us for reinstatement or any of what she's alleging. She only told us to delete fit reps. And I sent Posey's office my original I don't remember the form. You remember the form number.
Yeah, DD-149, yep.
That's the DD-149. I sent them the original. It said exactly what I said it said, which is, like, I want you to admit it was unlawful. I want you to reinstate me at this date. I want, and then after that, like, that's the part of the request. Then remove all that crap so I can have a career again. So thank God that Trump got in and said, everyone's getting reinstated, and with back pay and all that stuff. And I was like, huzzah, time to, get that going. No one reached out to me, by the way. That whole story about no one wants to come back. I'm like, I was never contacted. What poll was that? So again, another psyop. Like, I tell people, don't believe anything you read in Stars and Stripes. It's all BS.
Oh, complete BS. It's an arm for covering down the military industrial complex. They don't actually cover legit stories. Yeah. Just like the individual who reached out to me to cover my court martial for the whole pandemic. I'm like, hey, can you include in the story the fact that it's patently unlawful and illegal to mandate these products given the federal law? Wouldn't do it. Wouldn't put it in there.
No.
Like, wow. Really? You're not going to touch that? Oh, my editor won't let that. Won't let what? The federal laws? They won't let you write about the actual federal laws and the illegalities of this. No, of course not, because you're covering down from the industrial complex. Got it.
Yeah, and so, I reached out to a detailer, or not a dealer. I reached out to a recruiter. Hilariously, I did also reach out to a detailer when it seemed President Trump was gonna, was the president-elect. I emailed the detailer and I was like, hey, looks like I'm probably going to be coming back. I've got a 12-month lead time, like, can I look at an unclassed billet list? Is that even possible? And the guy was like, no, we're not going to do that. And then, of course, after Trump got in and made the announcement, I not only reached out to a recruiter, but I've reached back out to the detailer. I was like, hey, it's me again. You know what? I think Tokyo attaché billet would be great for, like poking at him a bit, like, but he didn't find it humorous at all. Let's just
Yeah,
put it
no.
that way. But yeah, and I reached out to the recruiter, and I'm currently working with Lieutenant Spadaro in the Orlando recruiting office, and they're saying there's no official word from Big Navy yet. There is
So they don't have
no,
any official guidance to bring you back in. You've reached out. I've reached out to the Army side, and they haven't contacted me back. I'm gonna have to re-engage there, but I also
yeah,
filed like
make
you
some
did,
calls.
file the 149 and haven't heard from them either.
They're
But I've
probably
got it all.
panicking and burning,
I've got the
burning their burn
receipts.
bags.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, how do we get rid of this evidence? Well, you don't, because it's in a court of record. And then at the same time, going back to what you were saying about them deleting evidence, the majority of them aren't, they're just that clueless that
Yeah.
they're actually writing down
Their
their
own crimes.
their own crimes and signing off on their own crimes. And you're the one that's we're the ones that were giving them the lawful orders the entire time, because a lesser magistrate can give, in your case, the general, lawful orders, and it's their duty to follow lawful orders because they're the ones that are acting illegal and unlawful. So again, it goes back to protected communications, all that. That's why we have a chain of command. It works both ways. You have to use it. I'm a huge proponent of it. But these mouth breathing leaders were just, go along to get along, and you just follow orders kind of type of mentality, when it's like, no, like lawful orders.
The
But
scary thing is a lot of them thought that they were like actually taking like a leader's position and doing the right thing and really hard charging, and I'm sitting there going, none of what you're doing makes scientific sense, nor psychological, nor like any kind of sense. And I'm quite literally giving you feedback, that this is what's going on in your command. And instead of observing and seeing, wow, what she's saying is lining up with what I'm seeing, they just went, no, you're lying. Blinders are on. And the thing to remember as well, it's not that they're lying. Most people who do stuff like this actually believe everything they say. And no amount of evidence will change their mind because they see what their reality is. They make their own reality based on what their perception is. That's why psych warfare is so effective.
mhm.
What I do have to say is Lieutenant Spadaro has been very helpful, and like he definitely isn't what is it, what I was dealing with before, where they were just trying to shove me out and being quiet about it. But what's great is, I've got an email chain now that's following that, hey, I've reached out, I've done my due diligence. I'm also covering my ass, because the last thing I want is to reach out to a recruiter and then have them come back and be like, well, because you simply re-enlisted or, got back in and you didn't specifically do X, Y, and Z, no back pay, and you're back to ensign or whatever. So I made sure to lawyer up my email and say, look, I'm only doing this because when I was getting kicked out, the JAG was quite literally lying to my face,
Right.
doing this stuff. And I also found out, I don't want to name the names of the people who were supportive of me, but I found out not only was the admiral like, gung ho to kick me out, my own cause, the last like day, that I was there or whatever, getting booted, someone asked him like, hey, aren't we going to give a farewell? Like 11 years, like, isn't she going to get like a proper hail and farewell? And the cause's words were, fuck her, we ain't doing shit for her. And that was a captain, that's the chief of staff. I also found out that same chief of staff had gone behind my back and tried to get my clearance pulled after I had the meeting with the admiral, saying, sir, you got sailors who are breaking their oath of office, which is, I take this freely without reservation or purpose of evasion. And guess what? If you say, I don't want to do X, but I need to keep this job, that is quite literally with reservation and purpose of evasion that you are maintaining your oath. So yeah, it's a mess.
These officers are now the ones that are receiving lawful orders from Commander-in-Chief Trump, and we've already seen they're in defiance of lawful orders. So the entire 4 years they said to us, you just follow orders. You just follow orders. Doesn't matter if they're unlawful, illegal, immoral, unethical. You just follow orders. But now they're getting legitimate lawful orders, and they can't seem to follow them. Why is it that we're still sitting here on a podcast, and why aren't we back in service? Why aren't we back in military service for our nation?
Yeah, I mean the way I see it is I'm in no rush because again, God puts us where we're meant to be and everything happens the way it is. And I had come to peace with the fact that I might never get justice on this. I might be an old, like, who knows, God can hope that I live to be an old 90-something-year-old woman and it's still unresolved. And I would just be like, Roger that, But as it is now, I'm like, okay, well, take your time because the longer you wait, the more back pay all of us are getting, allegedly, who knows, maybe they might try to wait out the next big happening, because they tried to kill Trump so many times,
Yeah. A distraction.
But, yeah, something like that. And, the way I see it is when we do go back in, we are the accountability because it's not about malice. It's not about revenge. It's about restoring the military to where it needs to be. And as you said, it's like the people that were just follow orders. I always had this conversation because I've met plenty of service members who disagree with me, who say you should have followed orders. It doesn't matter if they're wrong. And I was like, hold up, sailor, soldier, whoever I'm talking to. The enlisted have a slightly different oath than the officers. Enlisted, absolutely, I agree. You do not want every enlisted double checking and pushing back against, their superiors.
Shouldn't have to if you got good officers.
It's the officer's job. It's why we have, so much more responsibility. It's why we're paid more. We have to make a decision to go, is this actually lawful? Is this constitutional? Is this something that is going to, like, unforeseen circumstances, that's nagging at your moral compass? And that is why every officer who went along with this, in my opinion, they are in violation of their oath. And people are like, that's a little extreme. That's a little extreme. It's like, that's like saying 2 + 2 = 4 every time is a little extreme. Like, it's not extreme. It's what happened. And again, there's no malice here. I don't care. I just follow, I follow the breadcrumbs, and whatever is at the end is what's at the end. And I don't care if it's good or bad or whatever. I mean, look, I'm so damn hippie. It's like, oh, whatever will be. And the spirit, goes where it must. It's like, no. From the military perspective as well, like this is just how this shit needs to go, man.
Right. It's black and white. That's what I loved being in the military. It was black and white. There was always a freaking directions for everything. It was written down. So when it came to this, I'm like, guys, it's written down. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No. Please don't do that.
No, there's new written down things that say to do it. It's like the new written down things were literally just put there in the last 24 hours. Are you this stupid?
You're running psychological warfare against your own service members. Stop it.
They changed the definition of vaccine, and I went.
But the Department of Defense never changed the definition. The CDC did. The Department of Defense never changed the definition to vaccine.
Yep.
And so we're reinstating all of service member who refused COVID-19 vaccine. Well, that didn't exist. What existed was an experimental injection and unlawful mandates. So, but I think that's the crux of our issue. We know it's lawful, black and white, but nobody in the government wants to put that down on paper. No, I digress. I take that back. A federal judge in Harkins v. Austin said and confirmed that it was patently illegal and unlawful to mandate service members take an emergency use authorized product because the approved FDA one was never available. So I take that back. But you know,
But even with that, I'm sitting here going, look, as a member of the human race, I'm sitting here looking at something that was just thrown together in less than a couple of years, using technology that has been shown to be completely detrimental to every single living thing that it was ever injected into. And then, of course, we also saw the fact that, like, from the first injections, there were deaths right off the bat. There were major health issues. So I'm sitting here going, it's nice that we've got some backups, from some smart people in good positions, and at the same time, I'm like, just again using the Mark One Mod One noggin, anyone can see that this was a deliberate farce. Is I think how I described it on my page 13.
Right, because even if it was in some sort of governmental approval process, it's completely devoid of science, completely devoid of logical, like, oh yeah, okay, oh, it's approved, so this must be good now. Like that still doesn't fly either. From like a humanitarian, ethical, moral, just common sense standpoint. And then also the religious accommodation piece. So I filed one of those for all injections, and they never read like the fact that it was for all. Their mind just went tunnel vision to like COVID-19. I'm like,
COVID-19 only.
I was like, no, I'm done with all this business. Like none of this is scientific at this point. And so, but the whole religious accommodation piece was a religious test, and per the Constitution, in order to be an officer in the executive branch, there shall be no religious test. So we're testing all these people on their religious faith so they can maintain service in the executive branch of the government, yet completely violates the Constitution. And also they were using chaplains and JAGs and medical personnel as informants for the risk communication strategy, because all that information was fed up to the public health apparatus so they could weaponize risk communication strategies. They put it all in writing.
I was a sapper VA at one point, so I know all about like real, like how you can how protected information can get, right? How protected communication can get. There was so much illegality happening. I was even called by the state of Washington. They're like, hello, is this Jessica Sheffield? I was like, yes. Like, who is this? Oh, this is such and such from so-and-so hospital. We found out you tested positive for COVID. And I was like, excuse me? Because, they were making people do like tests and shit occasionally, right? And I was like, excuse me? Who informed you of that? And I found out that the military hospitals were passing all this info freely. And when I went to the JAG, I'm like, JAG, isn't that a HIPAA violation? They're like, well, no, it's for public health safety. I was like, so you make a law to bypass the law. Got it. Like,
meanwhile, we're using tests that were never even meant to diagnose. So we're talking about something that quite possibly may have not ever existed in what they said. I'm not discounting the fact that people are getting sick, but I'm discounting the fact that putting a label on a human body and then isolating them and saying it's this, when really you're manipulating the test to purposely say it's this.
The flu disappeared for a whole year.
Yeah. And now service members are actively right now getting kicked out for refusing the annual flu injections. It's like, but the flu went away. So it's proven that these military commanders want to mouth breathe military readiness, but you have to have, if you're going to do medical intervention on the human body, you have to have some sort of like legitimate scientific basis for that to then give an informed consent process to the service member, who will then still has the opportunity to accept or refuse. Anyway, We could go on and on. I
Oh,
do want to.
The sea stories could go forever. I love it.
We could go on from it. This has been great. I appreciate you coming on. I want to give you last words. We get your website at the bottom. Also, people can find you at your X account right there, correct?
Yeah, J_Kalei. I warn you, the most of the stuff that I post is kind of artsy fartsy, creative, nerdy stuff, and then usually my commentary is just like making comments on the more political or military side. So it's a bit of a mechanical bull of weirdness. So just be ready for that.
Good deal. Well, no, I appreciate you coming on the show. God bless you. Thanks for standing up for your oath of office. And we'll be looking to hear from you and see how that process goes for reinstatement. Who knows? We might find ourselves back in the belly of the beast. Anyway, God bless.
I would love it. Thank you so much, Mark, and have a great one. And good luck to everyone out there who's doing the same for reinstatement.
Appreciate you. Folks, go over, check out her socials, get involved. And if you got questions about your process of reinstatement, reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to her on Twitter, reach out to, there's thousands of us that were unlawfully discharged. Also go over Freedom Fighter 1776, get more information. And we have Freedom Financial 1776, where you can tap into some of these alternative financial technology, do your own research, custody wallets and things like that, and the cryptocurrency digital asset space, which is seemingly becoming bigger and bigger. Anyway, we'll catch you on the next episode. God bless. Much love.